Aaron, Brian, welcome. This is a really exciting time for both of you at Orgspace. You just closed your Series A round of funding, if that's right.
We call it Series Pre-Seed. It's like they have this thing they do in VC now where where it used to be a Series A, and then it was a seed. Now it's a pre-seed. And I think there might be even a thing called a pre-pre-pre-seed someday.
Yeah, raise sizes have increased a little bit. So we have, I think, what would have been characterized as a large pre-seed.
Congratulations on the big moment for Orgspace.
Thanks. We're excited. I mean, we only really got going with this in, call it, April or May of last year, of 2021. So it hasn't been that long. And it's going to be a long journey, right? We're very, very early on in the step forward here, but we were really thrilled to be able to get some support, even in that early stage, to get some oxygen in the thing and help keep us going. I'm a dad, right? I have a family, and an important component for me, I'm a little older than some founders, right? An important component for me was being able to go back to my partner and my folks and say that what we're doing is sustainable and that we'll be able to provide. And so that's been, I think, a critical component of it for me. The other nice thing about it is that it forces you through a process of validating the product, validating the business, right? You end up talking to a lot of interesting people and getting good feedback. I would actually say it was a really positive experience on the whole. And I feel like I even though it was often frustrating in terms of rejections, we learned a lot from it. It was valuable in the end.
Yeah. The thing I would add to that is absolutely, I think there's a couple, downsides and upsides, right? I have a lot of admiration for people that bootstrap their companies. The best kind of funding you could ever get is revenue. You don't give up any, equity when you just, fund off revenue, and it's great that way. But it's also really challenging to do that. And I think, for some kinds of business models where it is a race to, win the land grab, that could actually be a disadvantage because somebody else that's much better funded could obviously hire many more engineers, support many, screw up a few times and still, survive. And, so there's that dynamic as well. So I'm really glad we went through the process, and it was really gratifying. Though, as I would say, along with Brian, there was, probably the first 6 weeks where you're not getting phone calls back and nobody answers your email. You start to question your sanity a little bit, but, if you can fight through it, it works out really well.
That reminds me of the early days of building our community. It's just a lot of hassle to go out to ask people do you want to share something? Come join as a speaker, or convince the other side of the other side of the equation, like getting people in. But once you get through those, things becoming easier. That's a very pivotal, very important moment.
We have a lot of questions for you about bootstrapping versus raising, and also about like the experience of ghosting and how to get through that experience. But I think first off, I was wondering if we could zoom out and go back to the beginning and more of the origin story. And so think, just for some context, both of you prior to this were or are engineering leaders. Brian most recently as VPE at Meetup, and Aaron as VP at New Relic, before you decided to take this plunge together. So Brian, I was hoping we'd start with you and bring us back to the beginning of Orgspace and tell us a little more about that. And I guess you've also co-founded companies a couple of times before. So how have those experiences also shaped sort of the beginning phase of Orgspace?
Well, I tried bootstrapping and it didn't go well. So that I'll answer that one up front. Let's dial back maybe to a year and a half ago. So I took over as VPE at Meetup during a really turbulent time for the company and a really emotionally wrenching one for a lot of folks as well. We had just received news that WeWork was in the process of imploding in on itself, and was, as part of that, going to divest itself of all of its acquisitions, of which Meetup was one. And one of the first things I had to do in that leadership role was help lead us through a round of really significant layoffs within the software organization, which, Meetup had built up a really special, I think, community, a really special vibe within its software organization. Huge credit to former CTO Yvette Pasqua, I think, for driving that. And layoffs are always a difficult time, but I think in particular it was really a difficult thing to try to manage people through and make business decisions around how to move forward. And it struck me during that period that for large organizational shifts, the tools that I was using for those shifts were ad hoc, I think is the term that I would use, right? And I think this is echoed in the experiences of a lot of leaders, that a lot of this stuff just happens in spreadsheets. You have a name you have a spreadsheet full of names, and you're shifting the names around, or maybe there's a Miro board, or in the before times there was boards of stickies and things, right, in the pre-COVID era. And that was really underscored for me again when COVID hit, which forced another difficult organizational change on us. And then subsequently a lot of attrition from folks who were frustrated by that process, I think very understandably. And I walked out of that saying, I've had enough. I don't want to be in this particular role in this particular place anymore. Love the mission of the company, love what they're trying to do. Ton of respect for the folks there, but leading that organization during that time was really, really emotionally difficult on everyone. And I did not find myself waking up every day and sparking joy in my career. So I decided I wanted to back out of that role and try something else. And I'd been thinking for a long time about what the next thing was. And I think there's a great observation from Patrick McKenzie, Patio 11, I think he's known, which is that every spreadsheet is sort of a SaaS business waiting to happen. And it occurred to me as a starting point that maybe the spreadsheet that I was using to structure my engineering organization was a starting point. So was a potential business. So I started wandering through my Rolodex, right? I called around to folks that I respected, that I'd worked with before, that I had a connection with. And one of those folks was Aaron. I knew that he had taken on this role at New Relic. He and I'd connected a couple months prior just to kind of swap context and commiserate and get a sense of what was going on. So I called up Aaron and I said, hey, dumb idea. I'm thinking about this thing. What do you think? And I think Aaron took to it like a house on fire. He was, I think, likewise searching for something and immediately understood where he was coming from, but also was able to take that and bring a ton of original ideas to the concept, right? Immediately could think of a half dozen other directions that he wanted to tug it and ways in which we could collaborate to move it forward. And that has proven so far. I mean, it's early days, right? But so far it's proven to be a really fruitful collaboration. My prior experience at startups had been that finding good partners and keeping them together was the hardest part. Finding people who trust each other, who can rely on each other, who all bring something special to the table. It's really, really, really tough finding those people. And I feel very lucky that Aaron and I vibed so early and were able to get something going, which isn't to say that it's always been easy or that we haven't had, arguments or disputes from time to time, but but
yeah, we may ask a follow-up question about that. I think that's great. Aaron, bring us into your perspective. I mean, like, this is I think it's such a powerful insight from Brian and some of those early experiences, and then your initial inspiration and expansion of the idea. Bring us into that moment. What was your perspective with all of this going on?
Yeah, so I had been at Salesforce for a pretty long time. I'd taken on the VP Eng role at New Relic, but at the end of the day, I realized for me to be good at my job, I need to be passionate about the problem I'm solving. And it was very clear to me when Brian was talking about what he was thinking about doing, and I compared that with my passion about APM and that domain. It's a great domain. I love that domain, and we use tools to do that. I just I think I looked at the comparative levels of like how much I care about one or the other, and it became very clear to me that this is something I need to do. I need to do this with Brian. I hope we get to invent what everybody will use for how they run their engineering organizations, because kind of just our backgrounds coming from ThoughtWorks and kind of caring about the human-centered organizations that we want to run. We want to share that with everybody. So that was kind of what really kind of made the decision for me to jump out of the big corporate world and jump into the let's be a company of two people and see what the heck we can build. A lot of my background prior to that, so I'd been a senior director of product at Salesforce, and I've kind of gone between the two roles. But one of the insights I also had was if you want to build your own products, you're probably going to do that in either a very early stage company or a startup or your own startup, and you found something. If for no other reason, when you're in a very large company, to move the needle in a significant way, you could come up with a great idea that's going to generate $1 million of ARR that does not matter when you are a $1 billion company. Nobody cares, right? It's for good reason, right? They need to move the needle this much, and your idea initially is only going to move it this much until you develop a new market. So the bias is against new ideas in most larger companies. At least that's my experience. And so, starting to talk to Brian. So we get together, we start working, and I'm just swimming with ideas. I am like every morning I wake up with like 5, 6, 7 different things we could do. And I think one of the first things that, Brian had to bonk me on the head over was, probably after the 6th or 7th day of me and we can do this and we can do this. He's like, Aaron, dude, you need to focus, because we can't do 9 things. We're 2 people, and only one of us is programming right now. So I eventually started, getting back my programming chops. But that was certainly, in the experience for me. So the kind of the thing I wanted to do, in addition to what Brian was doing, was, we had this kind of org model with drafts for being able to kind of communicate about what alternate org models you might want to have. My thought was, let's bring some data and context so that when you're making the decision on what organization changes you want to make, you can easily understand what are people's team histories as they're moving around, what are people's tenures as they're moving around, how, all these other kind of data points you would use when you're in the place of making those decisions. So, that was kind of bringing the analytics angle was where I've kind of, specialized, within the company. And then also just, my background, I have business development in my background. I kind of feel like I've been a jack of all trades, master of none most of my career. And so that's kind of why I took on the role as kind of more the business side. But we're both engineers, both code on the product. And it's been just really, really fun going back to that kind of role as well, at least for a little while.